Greetings and thank you, Lynn. Hello and greetings and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anarcha Cornell. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Associate Director for Women's and Infant Health at the Association of Maternal and Child Health Programs. And for the past few months, I've had the pleasure of working closely with our colleagues at MCHB and City Match and my dear AmChip friends in planning this Region 5 Virtual Infant Health Equity Summit taking place in just 2 short weeks. Our team has been in frequent communication with many of you in preparation for that meeting. So thank you so much all for your patience, your curiosity, and your commitment to coming together as a region on your racial equity journeys. So today's webinar is a really exciting blend of a few activities. It's really cool how it's all come together. First, as you know, this is the regularly scheduled time when Title V programs and extended partners in Region 5 get together for collaboration. Second, we're on City Match's webinar platform. Thank you so much to the City Match team. And we're aligning with the tremendous Region 5 infant mortality webinar series that they've coordinated for the region for the past many months. And then third, today's webinar is really a foundational conversation and almost an energy setter for the November meeting. We are particularly grateful to our friends at the Anarcha Collective of Birthing Justice Advocates for hopping onto this fast-moving train and being willing to share their expertise with the Region 5 states. So today's webinar, it's entitled Empathy Cultivation, Practicing Awe as Essential to Equity in Design and Outcome. So collectively, the planning team for the November meeting thought that the wisdom of the work and framing of this group of experts would be very important going into our meeting in November. We hear often from the field that there's a desire for a distinct roadmap, for a checklist, for an action plan, for a clear path ahead in racial equity work. So we really invite you to join our speakers on today's call in exploring this concept of empathy as an entrance to discovery and curiosity and the emergent nature of racial justice work. I loved the invitation that I had the opportunity to receive recently and just found the information just so compelling. We hope that you'll bring this sort of heightened awareness to this practice and connection to the meeting in November. We will certainly seek to build upon it throughout the exercises and the structures in the November meeting. So thank you so much again to our colleagues speaking to us today for the gift of this framing. We're really excited to hear from you all. Just one small logistical item I just want to emphasize. Your calendar invites or some of the meetings, all the platforms that we've blended for today, you might have a hold on your calendar for 90 minutes. We just want to confirm with the group that this will be a 60-minute experience. So for those of you that thought that it would be 90 minutes or registered at a later time, we are very excited to give you the gift of 30 minutes back in your day. So with that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Indra Lucero and the Anarcha Collective of Birthing Justice Advocates to this group to share their experiences, their wisdom, and this really important invitation. So Indra, thank you to you and your team for your willingness to join us, and I will pass the floor to you.
Thank you so much. We are honored and delighted to be here, really looking forward to sharing what we've been learning and discovering with you all today. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Give me just a moment. Okay. Are you seeing my screen? Okay. So first, yes, I'm Indra Lucero, they, them pronouns, director of Elephant Circle. As we begin together today, first, I just want to invite you to do whatever you need to do to really get grounded, to arrive in the space. Maybe take a deep breath. Check that your feet are on the floor. Do what you need to do, maybe stretch, close that last window, put aside, silence your phone, whatever you need to do to kind of really get present. And as you do that, I'd also like to invite you to consider some parts of yourself that maybe you don't usually bring to a meeting like this, maybe isn't usually with you in the Zoom. Maybe some practice from your life, whether it be, sports or meditation or arts, some other part of you that you are familiar with, that you have confidence in. Go ahead and consider just bringing that part of you a little closer than you might normally have it in a meeting like this. Part of what we want to do today with you is cultivate some of those other tools and skills that we all have, but often compartmentalize and don't necessarily think of drawing upon in things that we think of as work. So as you're here, you're grounded, and you're allowing yourself to be a little more whole and have at close hand some more of the tools that you have in your personal toolbox. We invite you to go on this journey with us today, getting grounded. We're going to check in here, talk about the flow, and then I'll just share a little bit about how we're thinking about this as a case study. From there, Chanel will take it over and talk about empathy and how that's important to getting us to where we're going. And then I think Mickey takes it over with the matrix of empathy cultivation. And from there, Ishikar will lead you all into the breakout rooms and then help us wrap up. So we together at the Anarcha Collective are an assembly of folks from different groups who are already working in this area, but wanted to come together to see if we could forge new pathways, to see if we could tackle some of these, the biggest challenges in maternal health in innovative and new ways, using these tools that we refer to as design thinking tools. And we're thinking of it as a case study because we don't yet know what's going to happen. So we're just at the beginning, and we're inviting you to come kind of like take a peek at some of the tools that we've used at the beginning of this journey together, with the offering that maybe these tools will be useful to you as well. And you might think about using these tools also in sort of a case study way. It's an experiment. This is how one particular group has come together to think about using these tools. So with that, I'll give you a sense of the ways that we're using the tools so far and who we are. So you'll see here on the side logos of the groups that have come together with Ancient Song Doula Services, Black Women's Blueprint, City Block, Devi Women's Health, Elephant Circle, Primary Maternity Care. So we've got folks who are providers, who are policy folks, who are community-based, who are doula-based. And we've been funded through the Safer Childbirth Cities initiative as this collective in order to do this work specifically with regard to improving outcomes, changing trends in Brooklyn. So far, we're working on co-designing an equitable perinatal space for Black birthing people in Brooklyn. And the question is, how do we do that? One way that we've started to figure out how to do that is through our Cypher series. We had our first Cypher in September, and this is a community co-design session where we can explore the landscape of perinatal care in Brooklyn. This was our first one was virtual, but we would imagine future ciphers being in person in Brooklyn. So that's the overview of where we're coming from, the kinds of tools that we're thinking of using, and the things that we're using them on so far. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Chanel.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings, greetings, greetings. I hope that you are well and centered. I hope that you have your cup of tea next to you, that you hopefully maybe have some aromatherapy in the space that you are in, and that you are bringing your full self to today's presentation. More than anything else, we want to center what does it mean for us to bring our full selves to the work that we do. In centering, what I call centering the center, or meeting people where they are and not where we expect them to be. What does it mean for us to use empathy as a practice that equals being able to open up to what we don't know, right? Which opens up a pathway for understanding the things that we oftentimes aren't allowed to bring into maternal health spaces, public health spaces, spaces of policy, spaces of research, spaces of looking at data. What does it mean for us to really tap into our ancestral technologies and to go back and to fetch it and bring it forward in order to address injustice within the realm of birthing justice and centering Black birthing bodies within the context of our work? And I think that we've decided that it starts from a place of healing and of hope. Next slide, please. And that hope is centered in subverting white dominant cultures, which means we must have a willingness to center community, right? Meeting people where they are, not where we expect them to be, meeting them with grace, but also having grace with ourselves, having grace in the knowledge that we have, having grace with ourselves in our intuition and using that as a tool for uplifting justice in a human rights framework, using our willingness to, again, center ourselves so that we can center other people. Because I believe, like, in this work, you can't say, oh, I want to go forth and I want to do, or I want to be a change, or I want to be in a movement, and we're not having the willingness to be able to move ourselves, right? We're not looking at it from an introspective perspective of, like, we're questioning everything, right? That leads us to the answers of, like, how did we get here? What's the root of this? And then how do we digest it to move forward in a way that brings forth joy, that brings forth hope and a foundation for change? Next slide, please. And so in forward movement, we know that empathy, right? And we left in particular the middle empty with a question mark of, like, what does it mean for us to really question? What does it mean? How do you see yourself in that positionality? How do you create that awe? You know, that spark, the spark that, like, got you into the work in the first place. You know what I'm saying? The vibes, like, what's the vibe? What's really good? You know what I mean? When someone says that to you, when you walk down the street and you look at someone and they give you the head nod, right? And you give it back to them, you already know, like, you already know. You felt the energy, you knew what had transpired in that. What would it mean for us to, like, have that in our work consistently all the time? What does it mean for us to design in a way that, again, is centering the humanity and the human condition of what we are experiencing ourselves as human beings, but also in the communities that we love and we work in every day, right? Where we're not just institutions within those frameworks, but we're extensions of those, right? We're the heartbeat of what it is that the people have said and spoken that they want for themselves. And we also realize that it's ever evolving and changing. And so in that evolvement, right, we continue to go on a pathway of having empathy and having grace and creating awe every step of the way, because we're consistently questioning where we have been, where we are, and where we want to go. And I'll pass it over to Nikki.
Thank you so much, Chanel. I'm just, like, really appreciating this invitation that Chanel just offered us to be willing to move and to flow and to be in continual process of transformation. And so this practice is really about just that. It is the practice of moving together, And it is the practice of being with each other in ways that feel full and authentic and vibrant, and that like reassure us that like we're gonna be okay, but also that like we got us, and that that's like the energy that we're bringing into all the spaces that we are a part of. So this little equation for us really was our spark in wanting to create a tool, something that we could tangibly sit with and also watch our movement and our growth, and allow for success for us to be defined by like, how much awe are we experiencing? How much emotional capacity are we adding to our teams? How are we being with each other in ways that like really just offer those butterflies and those sparks? And so for us, this practice is around awe as a practice of design. And it really is an emotional philosophy that we're experimenting with here, because when people hear the term empathy, we know what it means. We've done it, right? We are deeply empathetic in our work, but we think that there might be a greater growing edge and a greater space for us to bloom into. And so that's why we created this matrix. And y'all are some of the first folks that we're sharing it with. And so we would really, really love to know, you know, after this session, after you've sat with this, like what's coming up for you and for your teams. And we're gonna explore that together today, and then have an opportunity to hopefully keep building and hear what happens next. So here is the matrix. And again, this is our invitation, you know, to really continue to build on empathy and to think about what it means to cultivate it. So first up here in our purple quadrant, we have something that we're calling reassured curiosity. So in reassured curiosity, we start with this idea of like identity and what it is that we're bringing to every space that we're in, right? Whether we're little squares on a Zoom screen or we're in person building with each other. Really the foundation of this part of the matrix is that we start with ourselves and all the identities that we carry, and that leads to a space of like discovery. But still in this place, we're like still very much like us centered, like what identities do I carry? How am I showing up? But we are also wanting to like recognize that in that is discovery or curiosity about other people. Some of the things that come up if you're in this part of the matrix is that you're open, but conditionally open, right? So your openness may still be guarded. Your openness may still be rooted in like wanting to know like what's going to happen next. And sometimes this may show up for us as like really needing like the full roadmap before we like agree to the field trip. Right. So when people talk about like, are you riding with me? Right. And you like, I want to know where, I want to know how long it's going to take. Like you have questions if you're in reassured curiosity, which is okay. Right. And you're valuing the outcome over the process. Right. So you want to know where you're going, but not necessarily like, are there going to be stops along the way? Are we going to like get to eat our favorite food? Right. But you're like really, really interested in the outcome. And in this part of the matrix, we also see this as like a performance of curiosity. So you're curious to the extent that your desired outcomes and like what you want from the process is going to be achieved. So again, in the case of a road trip, this may look like I'm open to going on a road trip if you're going to a place that I want to go to, or you're going to this place that you know is going to be good for you and meet your needs, right? So in this quadrant, there's like deep curiosity, but it's still really surrounding yourself and your needs. And you'll notice that in this matrix, there's no one right way to be. But you might be thinking to yourself, like, that sounds like me. And we want you to be in curiosity about where you are in this matrix. So then from the purple sphere, we're going to move on to this like auburn brown space, which we are calling curiosity as risk. So in this part of the matrix, you are privileging and centering safety over transformation. And so you want to feel safe. You want to be able to create spaces where other folks feel safe. And you really want yourself and others to be prioritized for your expertise. And so that's something that's deeply important to folks that might be in this quadrant. You might, though, not be welcoming of new ideas or new people. And again, not in the sense of like, no new friends, nobody else gets to come on the road trip, but in the sense of like, I want to create an experience where I know what's going to happen. And I'm going to be able to control some of what happens if I get to decide like who's driving, who's in the passenger seat, who's controlling the music. And there's also a fear that if you open up, there might be things to lose. Right? So you might not get your way, or there might be things that come up that you can't control or expect, right? And so if you're in this quadrant, you might be in a space either in your work or personally, where being curious presents a risk, where it puts you like on the other side of that edge where you're like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to go there. And sometimes this can show up and come up in our work when we've been doing the same thing for a really long time, and it feels really good to be in a flow of the things that we know, but there might not be space there to grow further. Maybe like we've reached an edge and aren't able to keep blooming from there. So again, if you're starting to resonate with this quadrant, there might be some things that are coming up for you around like, I don't know what's ahead, right? Or what's certain, or what might come up next. And there might be some risk aversion or curiosity aversion that's coming up for you in this moment. Again, around your work, around the folks that you work alongside, or even just more generally in the spaces that you move. And so now we're going to move from the side of this matrix that deals with curiosity and this like spectrum of curiosity that we might be navigating to awe. And Ishikar, who you're going to hear from in a little bit, and we've been talking a lot about awe. And we've been talking about awe in this like real spirit of openness around what awe presents in our work, and how when we're working in really, really difficult spaces, or we're working around difficult issues, or we're talking about what's not working in a space, we can sometimes lose sight of the awe. Maybe another word is magic, possibility of what else happens and what else is possible in a space. So Indra and Chanel offered that we connect a little bit with spirit. And so part of, as I move us through this next part of the quadrant, I want y'all to just connect with, even if resistance is coming up for you right now, you're like, what is my relationship to that word? That's also totally okay, because in this matrix, we're sitting with what it means to build some shared language around this so that we can talk about it, but also so that you can continue to push and stretch this matrix in new directions. So gonna move us to the green part of this matrix, which we are calling ambivalent awe. And so within the range of ambivalent awe, there is a prioritization of rightness over possibility. And so if you're in this quadrant, or this quadrant is showing up in your work, it might be that you or others are looking to maintain control of a process or prioritize maintaining your own footing. And so just because I started on this, I did not intend to start on this road trip analogy, but then y'all were in the chat talking about Illinois, Chicago, Michigan, and I was like, maybe we should go on a road trip from Brooklyn to meet y'all in the Midwest. But in this analogy, right, if you're in the space of ambivalent awe, you might be the person who's making the list, right? You agree to the road trip, you're like, okay, cool, going on the road trip. Maybe you had some input in the place or the space, but you want to control the process that you're going to have, right? And so maybe the road trip is supposed to, well, from New York to Illinois, I know is about like 14, 15 hours. So you're like, okay, I'm going to calculate the snacks that we need. I'm going to make sure we have a playlist that's exactly 15 hours. And you being able to have control of like what that road trip is going to look like is really important. But on the other side of that, you're also open to seeing what's not there. As long as it doesn't derail what you think we need, or what you think needs to happen in a process. And so, for example, if I'm on the road trip with y'all and I'm like, hey, like, what if we make this road trip an experience where we stop at every single place that sells popcorn, right? Because I love popcorn, folks from Chicago, maybe y'all like popcorn too. And I'm like, I want us to stop every single place where there's popcorn. The possibility, if you're in this space of ambivalent awe, is like, you might be curious about that, but you're like, no, we really should do this trip in 15 hours. And you're not necessarily open to like the derailment of this trip being a 20-hour trip or a 25-hour trip, even if we have the most amazing pop and popcorn. So in this quadrant, some of the things that might come up is that there is really like an openness around possibility, but there's still really a rooting in rightness. And like, can I still be right about how this trip should happen, how my clinic space should run, how this community organization should show up, how people should experience a space, right? And so the awe piece of this, there's still some skepticism around the full possibilities of what awe offers us. And then lastly, in this matrix, moving us over to this yellow gold, I did not mean to match this quadrant today, but here I am. So this quadrant is called awe as instinct. And in this quadrant, what is prioritized is what we're calling full rapture over everything else. So you are like showing up open to be derailed by what you don't know. And so it could be that on the road trip, you're like, I'm okay with everybody like contributing to this collective playlist and not knowing like when we're going to cross over from hip hop into country or from country into rock metal, or like we might make stops to get popcorn, or we might also do something completely different and actually just follow the signs. And anything that moves us, we say yes and we go, and we're just completely open. If y'all are these types of people, like y'all need to teach lessons on like how to take road trips, because no one in my family is in this quadrant, specifically around road trips. But the other possibility of being in this quadrant, and again, not without other things withstanding, but there's an openness to beauty and possibility of unknown outcomes. And so, whereas in some of the other quadrants, we saw folks like kind of hit the brakes a little bit on the possibility of things changing too much, or changing away from what we deemed as acceptable, or changing away from what we thought was right. In this quadrant, there's a real openness to the unknown and to starting a project, starting a road trip, starting working with a new group of people, and like not having a clear direction. Now, we're definitely not saying like go on the road without a map or without a GPS system, right? But what we are saying is like we might be moving together and not know the outcome of what is going to happen. Very similarly to us piloting this matrix with you all. And so these 4 quadrants represent all of us. And we can actually be in all of these different quadrants in different parts of our lives, maybe at different stages of a project, maybe at different stages of the day, depending on how we work. But what we want to invite right now is an opportunity for us to reflect on where we are. I'm actually going to stop talking now so that we can get some reflection. And then we're going to do some like behind the scenes Zoom magic, and y'all are going to be partnered with a person in this space, trusting that exactly who you're partnered with is who you're meant to talk to about this. And the question that we want to invite is like, where are you right now in your work? And where would you like to be? And so you're going to get to be in 2 breakout rooms. And so the first room is going to be 6 minutes. The second room is going to be 6 minutes. And then we're going to have an opportunity to come back and to talk about how this matrix fits into some of the other beautiful experiments and creations that we've been playing with and imagining at Anarcha, and that we hope y'all will join us in. So I'm also going to drop in the chat like a link to this, to the matrix, just in case you're like, I don't know what matrix I'm in, maybe the purple one, maybe the green one, just so that y'all can revisit it. But also, when you get into your small groups, feel free to say like, I don't know where I am, right? Or to talk through it from a place of curiosity in an attempt to get to awe. And you know, if it's helpful to keep using this road trip analogy, we can keep using it. If it's helpful to use another analogy from your work or from a space that's showing up for you right now, please do that. And if you get into a breakout room with someone you don't know, please say hi before jumping in, recognizing that that's exactly who you're meant to be partnered with. So I'm gonna stop talking now. I'm gonna ask our amazing host to support us with Zoom breakouts, and I'm gonna drop the matrix in the chat.
All right, thank you. I am creating the breakout rooms right now, just making sure that we have an even number in each room, and I will open the rooms shortly.
All right, y'all, welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you to our wonderful folks holding us down in terms of making sure we could get into some breakout rooms. I got to go into a breakout room. Shout out to Stacy, my incredible buddy. And please, if y'all didn't get to offer any gratitude to your first pair, please make sure to do that. So in a moment, we're gonna get into a second breakout room, new person, new moment, another opportunity to just process what is coming up for you around this matrix. What are you sitting in? What questions do you have? And one thing that I just want to share as like a quick reflection from my opportunity to be in a breakout room was the opportunity to really think about like when being in certain quadrants is useful or supportive or deepens our work. And so the fact that, again, like each of these placements on the matrix are actually valuable in different ways. And some, you know, are meant to be disrupted and meant to be shaken up. And so just an invitation to consider as you head into your next breakout room. So again, we're gonna head into breakout room 6 minutes, and then we're gonna have an opportunity to come back, debrief a little bit, and then talk about what else is on our minds and hearts as we're moving through this.
Nikki, real quick, or maybe Indra, would you mind showing that the slide with the quadrants again? We had a couple folks join late, so it might be nice to have a little bit of context. Oh, excellent. There is.
Thanks, Indra. So here's the matrix again, y'all. We are thinking about what it means to cultivate empathy. And we've created and are exploring the use of this matrix and each of the quadrants as an opportunity for us to explore where we are right now in our work and where we want to be in our work. So please like feel free to like go into whatever breakout you're placed in with the curiosity around this. And if you need to spend, you know, a few minutes reading this, that's completely fine. There's no right answers here. It really is an invitation to a framework and to a way of being with ourselves and other people. And also something that's not static. Actually, my brilliant partner, Stacy, brought up, like, this feels really different than like personality tests, which are like, you're in this quadrant, this is who you are, this is who you'll be forever. But actually, this is an opportunity for us to say, here's where we are right now, here's how it's serving us, here's how it's not serving us, and where might we want to be in our work around curiosity and awe. And the matrix is also in the chat again, so you can pull it up when you get into breakout rooms.
Thank you for that. And here we go. I'm opening the rooms.
All right, welcome back, welcome back. It's beautiful to see so many like smiling, vibrant faces return to the screen. Trusting that y'all had a beautiful experience connecting in your breakout rooms. And so we want to take a few moments to debrief, and you're going to keep this really, really short. So like if there's one word that you're feeling right now, please drop it in the chat. If you feel more comfortable with an emoji, drop that in the chat. We're going to take about 30 seconds to do this, and then we're going to pass it off to Ishakar to like deepen us in like the possibilities of this work in action. So let me see some emojis. Let me see some words. One word, one emoji, how you're feeling right now. I see gratitude. I see energized. Stars, sparkles. Thank you for this. Would love to see a few more. Zara, I always use this as a hug emoji, so hopefully that's how you meant it. Full. Ooh, reconnection after many years. Peaceful, pensive. Hug emoji. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. We only have 10 minutes left, so I'm gonna pass it off to Ishakar for the next part of our session. Thank you.
Hey everyone, so let's get to the next slide. So I want to preface, I think we have one slide before this, Indra? Maybe one slide before? One slide before? All right, here we are. Okay, so on practice. So I want to preface this by saying that the design lineage that I come from is Coraline and Equity Meets Design. These are my places where I learned design, where I cultivated design. And as I've been kind of building out curriculum for this process that we've been in, I've been thinking a lot about design thinking, not just being a set of practices, a set of exercises that we take people through, but also thinking of design thinking and design justice as a change orientation. And that what it requires of us is that we change the way that we think together and we change the way that we feel together. And that a root of a lot of oppression is the way that we think, is the way that we feel, what we think is possible, and what we feel is possible. And so design thinking requires that we kind of shatter a lot of that and root in the current design that we're in, and in some ways grieve that design that we are having to exist in, and also aspire to something different. And we know that we can't do those two things without having a certain level of awe, having a certain level of bright eyesness, this beginner's mindset, or the fool if you're into tarot. And we can't do that without having a certain sense of curiosity, which is allowing ourselves to sniff around, kind of tap into this instinctual nature of ours, to sniff and to know that we'll find something, to know that we're on to something. And so that's the matrix that you're seeing. Is it's an orientation to being, it's an orientation to feeling while you are digesting something collectively and while you are building something collectively. Some of the ways that this has been activated is in a couple of different spaces. One in our cipher space, and I'll talk a little bit about the garden metaphor that was used, envisioning with the group to better understand the current design and the aspirational design, which is a process in design thinking that many folks will have you do. And then last but not least, this idea of mapping coordinates, and this being one of the ways to really activate curiosity and activate our deep knowing of what is taking place and observe it collectively. So I'll go through each one of them. So we can do next slide. So this piece was something that we used in the Cipher series as a curiosity exploration and as a way of getting a group of people together that deeply understand the landscape of the birthing movement and asking them, what do you see? Because we know when you design, it's important to design with different identities, and that there are going to be limitations to what you know about the landscape or the ecosystem of the problem. I really want to hunker down on that word ecosystem, because problems exist together. They are conflate with one another, they mingle with one another, but sometimes our identities can limit the extent to which we can see different elements of the problem. So we need everybody on deck to say, what are you sensing, smelling, tasting of this problem? So we had folks identify what are the blockers in the Brooklyn perinatal system? What are the things that are pests? What are the things that are hindering the growth? And another ways of thinking about blockers is like, what are the things that are killing people, right? What are the policies, behaviors, actions, unconscious ways of knowing and doing that are blocking folks? We ask them, what's blooming? What are the products of the culture that we can identify both the positive and challenging aspects. We ask them to identify the behaviors. What are people doing in this garden? What are people doing in this ecosystem to either have things grow or have things be blocked? And then last but not least, I was kind of questioning folks about what are the fertilizers? What are the things that allow things to thrive and grow? And a deep part of this is making sure that people know that they are also the fertilizers, that we have invited fertilizers to also identify what are the actions that you are taking that are enabling things to grow, because we always want to kind of get at awe and get at curiosity from a state of hopefulness, because we know that despair, like we've been talking about, these emotions that we need in order to push the process forward, despair is something that can definitely block us. But when we're hopeful and can see how we can be change makers and also the change makers that are in our ecosystem, it propels us. So this is just one tool, one piece of the curriculum. We can go to the next slide. Another piece of the curriculum that kind of came out of seeing a lot of different design processes and how people kind of conceptualize where we are and where we want to go. You go to design sprints and people will say, okay, jot out like, what the future might look like, or jot out, on a little Post-it note over here, whatever the case may be. I remember giving Savannah, one of our amazing leaders of this project, a call and being like, can you actually record a meditation? And can you record a meditation where you also ask people to channel their ancestors and their spirit guides to let us know what is the aspirational design? What are we moving towards? And we know what's required in this is that awe. Mickey mentioned earlier the kind of hint of religiosity in here, but we know that we have imaginative resources, we have spirit resources that we can tap into to help us deeply know what it is that we want to move forward and how it is that we want to move forward. And once we know that, once we get into that awe state, we can identify the problems, the processes that are interrupting us to getting to that point. So this is another way, a very practical, tangible way to get people into that mindset of awe and seeing it as a tool. Not just something that we can, some people might see this and say, oh, it's flowery, whatever. No, this is a very tangible way to see the future, a very tangible way to understand where we are, and a very tangible way to build a bridge between the two of them. Next slide. Show you one more tool. So this is something that I've been prototyping with my students a lot, and we're prototyping it now with our group, which is mapping oppression, mapping the coordinates of oppression. This requires a lot of curiosity. So essentially what the ask is that I prompt people to identify a system of oppression or a habit of oppression, and then ask them to identify the spaces in their environment where this oppression most exists, right? So we can be in hospitals often, we can be in the spaces where very challenging things happen and still not deeply understand them and deeply observe them. And so what does it mean to step back into curiosity, step back into awe, and see something that feels very mundane, see something that feels very usual to you in a whole new way? And so I've asked folks to, one example is to map the relationship between story and location. So look at your environment. What are the things that consistently take place in this room, on that street? With this particular doctor, so that we can start identifying the nuances of the problem. I also asked folks to map perceptions of a topic or issue. So you can map your own perception, or you could interview others and see, where are you feeling the most safe? Where are you feeling the least safe? And all the things in between, as a way to understand things. And then next slide. Some other practical ways are also to map the experiences. Here on the left, you see a map that my students really liked, which was mapping the emotions that take place in each different room. And so kind of getting an emotional landscape. And then the other one is mapping the tools of oppression. So something we might see as a tool of oppression is surveillance, this panopticon that we live in. where people are constantly watching us and surveilling some communities more than others. And so how can we identify these tools? And even asking y'all, as we're talking about birth work, what are the tools of oppression that exist in this topic that we are all trying to deeply investigate? And so the kind of ultimate kind of goal of this, and what I've seen my students do so far and what we're going to be doing in the future, is putting all these maps together and saying, what is the ecosystem, right? From our awe, from our curiosity, we can see our ecosystem in a fuller way. We can see our problems in a fuller way. And therefore understand what are the steps that we need to take to move away from this and move towards the aspiration that we talked about earlier. So yeah, I think this is our last slide, right? Do we have one more besides one way moving forward? Yeah, so those are some practical tools for applying the matrix that we saw earlier. And what I would just want to encourage you all to do is, these are the tools that we've cultivated. These are the tools, this is the curriculum that we're using, but there's no reason why you all can't think of what are the tools that we might need to tap into awe or curiosity for our specific topic, right? Because these tools are just vehicles to move us towards the feeling states and the thinking states that keep our minds open. Your tools could be different, right? So just wanting to leave you with that.
Thank you so much, Ishakar, for those powerful reflections of how we utilize this framework in deep practice and in action. And I just put in the chat a few of the questions that Ishakar offered us, like what tools do we need right now? How can we adapt tools for our specific spaces and communities? And so we want to just invite, we know we're a little bit over time, but if folks can stay for another minute or two, what's one way forward, one commitment that you're making from this conversation? It could be that you're gonna journal and commit to just like reflect on what awe means for you. It could be that you're gonna make your own map of a space, right? And to Ishakar's invitation, deepen in like our understanding or our reframing and our intimacy and connection with the problem, so that we can chart a different way forward. And so just want to ask, like, who are you going to talk to? What are you going to do? How are you going to take care of yourself? I know some folks thought this session was another 30 minutes and it's not. So that means that you have some time maybe that you didn't know you had to reclaim. But there's not one perfect path forward, but there's an abundance of futures, of ways to manage resources together and to be brilliant together. And those words are by Adrienne Maree Brown. And so we're welcoming them into the space. And so just want to invite, if there's anyone who wants to come off mute or drop in the chat, one commitment or one way forward from these lessons, these learnings, these invitations that we've offered in the last hour. All right, I'm seeing a lot of pensive faces, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful space to be in reflection with each other. So no, you don't have to share. Just want to invite people, right? We go to lots of sessions and lots of workshops and are together in lots of spaces, but Ishakar invited us to be together in different ways. So I will be hanging out over here in awe of the possibilities of what could be. And just so grateful that y'all chose to spend some time with us this afternoon. I'm looking forward to that road trip that we might get to do when we can see each other and be together in person.
You made me want to jump in the car and get on the road. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thank you so much to the team. Be well, take care. We look forward to being together more soon.